Good morning. Today we're going to start learning the first of our 4 methods we can use to solve quadratic equations. All 4 of these methods you learned in Algebra 1. We're going to review them again, but they're also going to include complex numbers or imaginary numbers in their solutions. So we're going to start by solving by factoring, and then tomorrow we're going to move on to solving by square roots. So if you are still struggling with factoring, it's really important that you get in during Buck-Win or after school to get help with that, because we are going to use it often for the rest of the semester. So, when we solve by factoring, we're going to use something called the zero product property. What that means is if we multiply 2 values and get an answer 0, then at least one of those things has to be 0. So if I have a times b equals 0, then either a equals 0 or b equals 0, or both. So for quadratics, what we're going to do is if we have 2 factors like x minus something times x minus something equals 0, then we need to set each part equal to 0 and solve to see which one works or both of them. Okay, so just to basically review that concept, in these 2 problems, notice everything is already factored for you. Okay, so if everything's already factored for you, what you need to do to solve is take each part and set it equal to 0. So n equals 0 and n minus 6 equals 0. For the first one, I can't solve anything, so I'm going to leave that. For the second one, I'm going to add 6 to both sides. So my 2 answers are 0, and then 0 plus 6 gives me 6. Okay, let's do it again for the second one. I'm going to take both parts, set them equal to 0, and then solve. Now, for this one, 2 really common mistakes that I see. Students get here and they forget to divide. And then I get a lot of decimals, and I prefer fractions. Fractions are a little bit easier to deal with. So 1 divided by 8, since I can't reduce it, is just 1/8. Second one, subtract 1 from both sides, and we get -1 there. Okay, so our answers are 1/8 and -1. Pretty simple, right? Now let's do some where we do not have a factored form already. For both of these, I want you to notice something, paying close attention to this. Zero product property only works if it's equal to 0. So notice that I have an equals 8 here. I need to go ahead and move that over before I can do anything with it as far as factoring goes. So it always has to be equal to 0 before I can worry about factoring. Okay, so now that I move that over, I have equals 0. Hang on, let me fix that. Manual-like terms. So I should have a squared minus 3a minus 10 equals 0. And then I'm going to go ahead and factor. Since there's nothing in front of my a squared, I'm going to use x factor. So the top of my x is -10, bottom is -3. So my 2 numbers that multiply to give me -10 and add up to -3 are -5 and +2. And because there's nothing out front here, I can go ahead and go right to my parentheses. I have a minus 5 and a plus 2 equals 0. Set each part equal to 0 and solve. Okay, so main difference between what we did last week when we reviewed and what we're doing now is that we actually have to take this a step further. So for the first one, I'm going to add 5 to both sides to get 5. Second one, I'll subtract 2 from both sides to get -2. And those are my 2 answers. Now to check this, all you have to do is plug them back into the original and make sure you get 8 on this side, because there's an 8 on that side, which these do actually work. Same thing for b. I need a 0 here, so I'm going to do -4 on both sides. So I end up with 3x squared plus 18x. Well, that cancels and that cancels, so it equals 0 there. Since there's only 2 terms there, I need to check for a GCF first, like 3x, and then see if I can factor using difference of squares if there's an x squared left over. In this case, there's not. So I'm going to go ahead and set both parts equal to 0 and solve. So divide by 3 for the first one to get 0. Subtract 6 for the second one to get -6. Okay, moving on. Example 3. Notice there's a bunch of extra stuff here. A lot of students are going to tell me they want to do this, which is okay, except that I don't like that negative in front of my 5v squared. Makes it harder to factor. So what I'm going to tell you to do is if that happens, I want you to change all your signs. So instead of having a -5v squared, I'm going to make that a positive, make that a negative, make that a positive. Just a little bit easier to deal with when there's not a negative up front. So I'm going to make my x 24. Sorry, I don't have 24 on top. I need to do 5 times 24 for the top. So 5 times 24 gives me 120, I believe. And negative 34 on the bottom. So if I go through to find my factors here, I end up with a negative 30 and a negative 4. Now, a lot of students don't like the zeros over here. You can switch the sides. So I'm going to just go ahead and do 5v squared minus 30v minus 4v plus 24. Not even going to worry about the 0 right now. I'm going to make 2 groups and factor. So in my first group, I can take out a 5v. In my second group, I can take out a negative 4. And then since those match, I have v minus 6 out front and 5v minus 4 in my second group. So now that I factored the whole thing using AC split, I can go ahead and solve. So v minus 6 equals 0, 5v minus 4 equals 0. I'm going to add 6 to both sides. Add 4 to both sides. And then don't forget to divide by 5. So I get 4 divided by 5, or 4/5, for a final answer. Okay. Let's do one more. Need a 0 here, so I'm going to do minus 60v on both sides. So I get 5v squared minus 60v plus 175. Notice that I didn't combine those together because one's v squared and the other one is not. And then we're going to go ahead and check for a GCF, and you should always check for a GCF first. I didn't really say that, but I'm going to go ahead and do that. I can divide everything by 5. So if I do that, I'm left with v squared minus 12v plus 35. Okay, once I've done that, if I'm going to factor the part on the inside of the parentheses, I don't have to do AC split now. That just made it a lot easier, a lot smaller numbers. All I have to do is x factor. So top of my x is 35, bottom is negative 12. So I have negative 5 and negative 7. So I get v minus 5, v minus 7. I'm going to set everything equal to 0. Notice this is out front. I'm going to show you what ends up happening. And I'm going to flip back here afterwards to talk about a different one. 5 can never be 0, so I don't need to worry about that. I do need to solve the other ones. So I get 5 and 7 for my final answers. Now the reason I didn't solve this one, but I did solve this one right here, is because this one has an x with it. So I had 3x there. I can solve if there's an x. If there's not an x left, I can't do anything with it. Okay. That is it. Solving by factoring. You need to decide how to factor. So GCF, get everything equal to 0. GCF, and then decide if you're going to do x factor, AC split, difference of squares. Set all the parts equal to 0, and solve from there. There are 4 guided practice problems for you to try. So go ahead and try those. You can go through them in class. And then your next lesson is going to be solving by square roots. Have a great day.